Tonight I'd like to address a fundamental question, bringing in some perspectives from other Buddhist traditions as well. The question is, how can we live our lives dedicated to realization, dedicated to awakening, and still be fully engaged in our life in the world? This is not an easy thing to do. We often think of people becoming monks or nuns as choosing the difficult way. Actually, they're choosing the easy way, and we're choosing the difficult way. This is what the Dalai Lama said. He said, within a short time span, it is impossible to change all our concepts or the entire attitude of our minds. It needs constant application. Speaking from my own small experience, from the age of about 16 or 17, I began to make some serious effort to change and improve my outlook. Now, and this was some time ago, at 55, some 39 years have gone by. Several decades have passed, yet still the result is not satisfactory. We do have to struggle and to work hard, and that is the reality. So if that's the Dalai Lama's assessment, we may have a different assessment of his progress on the path, but it's the realization that it is hard to do. This is not a trivial undertaking, this purification of our minds, of our hearts. One framework of understanding that can give us a direction and give us a structure to our efforts, to how we can undertake this in the world, is found in the expansive teachings of what in Buddhism is called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a word in Pali and Sanskrit. Bodhi means wisdom or awakening, and citta means heart. So we could say the heart-mind of awakening. And this has two levels. The relative level of bodhicitta is compassion. And for us in practice, it can take the form and the very deeply transforming insight that our practice is not for ourselves alone. That we can nurture the aspiration, the motivation of undertaking the practice, engaging in it, for the welfare and benefit of all beings. Cultivating this aspect of bodhicitta, this aspect of compassion, helps to open our hearts. It broadens our path. And it connects our practice here, connects all our efforts with other beings. So this is the relative level of bodhicitta, compassion. The ultimate level of bodhicitta, this awakened heart, awakened mind, is the empty nature of the mind itself. So relative bodhicitta is compassion, ultimate bodhicitta is emptiness. And it's said that when these two are present, enlightenment is unavoidable. So it's worth considering, how we can cultivate both these aspects in our lives and in our practice. A transforming realization is that compassion and emptiness are not, in essence, two different things. They're not polarities, but rather, as we deepen our understanding, we see that they are expressions of each other. There's one teaching by the great, 18th century Tibetan master Shabkar. And this teaching expresses the union of the relative and absolute or ultimate bodhicitta, emptiness and compassion. He taught the mind's nature is vivid as a flawless piece of crystal. intrinsically empty, naturally radiant, ceaselessly responsive. So these words are a direct pointing to our own minds. Intrinsically empty, naturally radiant, ceaselessly responsive. How can we understand what intrinsically empty means? Because in English, the word emptiness, for most people, is not all that appealing. It really doesn't seem like some great spiritual goal or aspiration. You know, what are you striving for? Emptiness. Somehow doesn't always inspire us. You know, because in English the word might imply a lack or an absence or a loss or kind of a blank nothingness. But in Pali and Sanskrit, the word for emptiness is shunyata. And in the context of understanding the Dharma and our own minds and experience in the world, this word, shunyata, has many profound implications, which the word in English doesn't really convey. And different of the Buddhist traditions emphasize one or another of these perspectives or implications of shunyata. Most fundamentally, it means that all things are empty of self. But that's fundamentally what emptiness refers to. Empty of self. So on this most basic level, we can understand emptiness to mean lack of self-centeredness. Now usually in our lives when we think of self-centeredness, we might think of it as a kind of emotional or psychological deficiency, you know, that I might suggest our friends go to a therapist for. You know, they're very self-centered, something's just not quite adjusted right. But self-centeredness actually has a much deeper meaning. It's when we hold or create a sense of self to be at the center of our lives. Self-centeredness. We create this sense of self to be at the center. And then this sense of self or concept of self becomes the reference point for all that we think and sense and feel. It's the idea or the felt sense that there's someone behind this process of mind and body to whom it is happening. You know, and as we've talked over these last weeks, it's the felt sense or conceptualization of my body, my feelings, my thoughts, my job, my relationship, my religion, my beliefs, my opinions. We begin to see that this sense of I or mine is quite extra. But for the most part in our lives, we are living in the gravitational field, the gravitational pull of this self-center. You know, and all of our hopes and our fears, our plans and our worries are all revolving around this sense of self, this belief in self. All our desires revolve around this sense of self. Amazing that we continue to be seeking, you know, ever new experiences, even knowing that they continually change, but we keep seeking, you know, new experiences as if the next one will fulfill us. And this is what the Buddha was illuminating when he reminded us that this beginningless samsara, This endless round of birth and death, and whether you think of it within one lifetime, of the birth and death moment after moment, or over many lifetimes, is just fueled by our chasing after or clinging to one experience of the aggregates or another. It's only the 5 aggregates which are arising and passing. And yet, because we're living in this gravitational pull of the self-center, we keep chasing after new experiences. Ramana Maharshi, who's that very great Indian saint of the last century, he had a wonderfully counterbalancing instruction to this continual seeking for new experience, to this self-center. He said, try to be less, not more. And I just find that so concise. It just turns us around. Instead of the effort to be more, we can just turn around, let go and be less. Through a sustained wise attention, through sustained mindfulness and concentration and wisdom, we begin to leave this self-referential orbit, and we are slowly drawn into the gravitational pull, the gravitational field of the Dharma. And we get glimpses of the zero center of emptiness, of self, rather than the self-center of I or mine. The great Sufi poet and philosopher and mystic Rumi, he said, live in the nowhere that you come from, even though you have an address here. And so our practice gets us in touch with, or allows us to reside in the nowhere that we come from. So the challenging question, I think, for all of us, as Dharma practitioners leading lives in the world, leading a lay life in the world, how can we open to and realize this emptiness of self in the midst of full and busy lives? Is this possible for us to actually come to this realization of emptiness?